should have. So one of the things that we know in our industry is that clients don't leave because of performance. They leave because of lack of communication.
Hey there, it's Amy Evans. Thank you for listening today. You're here today because you really need to hear this. There is nothing worse than dealing with customer churn in sales. It can become a hole you can never dig out of if you don't get out of it, especially when you sell add-on deals to existing customers. Given what's been going on in the markets, right now is the absolute best time to be having a conversation with your customers. Today, you're going to hear from Cindy Nagel, and she brings lessons from the perspective of the financial wealth advisory world that crosses all industries when it comes to tackling the elephant in every single room today, worried customers. And you've got a choice. You can either show up and be in the conversation or hide and hope that your customers are going to stick around. Today, you will learn how to quickly assess the kind of personality your customer has, even if you've never met them before. And as a bonus, Cindy shares what to look for in a financial advisor if you are ready to hire one. Thank you for listening. I got so used to being the only woman in the room, I didn't even notice it anymore. Did you know that only 31% of sales leaders are women, even though 50% of the sales reps are women? I'm Amy Evans. After 25 years of sales leadership in corporate America, I help B2B tech and AI CEOs hit their number as a sales strategy advisor. I also host the Women in Sales Leadership podcast, where you'll learn what it takes to lead at the highest level, withstand the pressure to deliver the numbers, and elevate your career without losing yourself. No fluff, just the real stuff of women in sales leadership. If you aspire to become a CRO, vice president, first-time sales leader, or start your own business, you're in the right place. You are going to want to stop right now and click follow so you don't miss the episodes that drop every week. So welcome to the Women in Sales Leadership podcast. Today we have a really exciting guest. Her name is Cindy Nagel. And Cindy is a trailblazer at the intersection of finance and human behavior. As a certified financial planner who is also certified in behavioral finance, Cindy brings a refreshing human-first approach to helping financial advisors navigate really the emotional side of working with their clients. She's got decades of experience working in sales, wealth management, and has a real passion for coaching. She's on a mission to empower financial advisors to have powerful conversations with their clients that resonate with their personal goals and deepen trust. If you've ever felt stuck or overwhelmed when it comes to having powerful conversations with your clients about wealth management, financial advisory practice, then Cindy is your person. Cindy, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Amy. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I am so glad you're here. And I was hoping you could spend a minute just, share with our listeners a little bit about you. Tell me your story.
Sure. Actually originally from Florida. So I'm a big Gator. Went to University of Florida and was a finance major many, many moons ago. Moved around a lot for work. My first job, I like to say, out of college, I was a debit agent at an insurance company, which meant that I had a zip code that I covered, and I had to call on people in that zip code to try to do policy reviews for life insurance. So I joke that I worked there 1 year, 9 months, 3 weeks, 2 days, and 4 hours. That's how much I absolutely loved working there. So over time, over the years, I actually did open an independent advisory practice, built and sold it, charged for financial planning back when that was a newer thing to do. But what I really found my passion was, and I've done this through sales management and through coaching, is working with the advisors directly. I feel like I make a bigger impact on the end client by working with the advisors. And so that's what I love to do. And the behavioral side, especially when you can see what's going on in the markets these days, plays a big part in having conversations with clients.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I'd love to hear, when you're working with right? So you've got this sales background, you've got
Mhm.
this, financial planning background and practice management background. Talk to me. What are the things that you see happening when you're working with your clients that are maybe some of the biggest, well, areas of improvement
Mhm.
that they could make? What do you notice?
Sure. So you're exactly right, Amy. There's kind of two major parts. One is the conversation and behavioral side, and the other is the practice management side. So I'll actually start with the practice management side. So when I talk about practice management, it doesn't matter, what type of advisor, whether they're working, in an independent practice or what we call a wirehouse, or maybe they're in a bank, something like that. There's always things that they should be looking at that they could outsource or streamline to make it more effective. Because when you actually take a look at your time and you put a dollar amount on your time, there's things that advisors are doing that they shouldn't be doing. Now, some things they should be doing on their own. For example, if you're going to do a LinkedIn post and you want to do a personal LinkedIn post, you obviously want to do that yourself. But if you're doing a monthly newsletter or something like that, rather than thinking every month, gosh, what should I write about this month? It may very well make sense to outsource that. So looking at how to make their practices more efficient and effective. But what people don't think about, that's what they think about
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that part of their practice, right?
Okay.
So the phrase I like to use is working in the business versus working on the business. So when you're working in the business, you're doing all the things, right? You're doing oh my gosh, I've got to follow this client. I've got to call this company. I've got to get this turned in by such and such date. When advisors actually take a step back and work on their practice, they tend to look at those things that I mentioned a little bit ago. Gosh, I wonder if I should outsource some marketing. I wonder what kind of client event I should have. So, one of the things that we know in our industry is that clients don't leave because of performance, they leave because of lack of communication.
Mm.
You can imagine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, especially right now. So, what tends to happen on the practice management side is we've got to have those touches that are going out to those clients on a regular basis, whether it's a phone call, a newsletter, whatever it might be. The second part of the coin that advisors don't look.
Hey, I wanted to share something with you. I'm super excited about it. I'm hosting a masterclass for you, and the topic is going to be on elevating your career, getting yourself to the next level. It's totally free to join. It's going to be coming up in June. And for you, you have an opportunity to sign up to make sure you get on my early access list to join the masterclass. How do you get on the list? Really easy. There's going to be a link in the show notes wherever you're listening to or viewing this show from. So you can, number one, find the waitlist link, and you'll find the waitlist to masterclass link. Or if you're a LinkedIn person like I am, go find me on LinkedIn, Lynn Evans on LinkedIn.com. And you can find my waitlist link right there at the top of my profile. Easy, add your email address. It's simple. You'll get notified as soon as the masterclass is available. And I'm really excited to see you there.
The second part of the coin that advisors don't look at, they just simply don't when they step back to take a look at their practice, is they don't look at the conversation side being more efficient, which sounds weird, which I'm going to talk about in a second. An efficient conversation, right?
Yeah.
Or the behavioral finance side. So what I like to do when I'm working with advisors, if they're up to it, a lot of times, frankly, they're up to the practice management stuff, but they're not always up to this part of it. But I do think this is key, is how can you quickly figure out how a client likes to be communicated with in a conversation? What do they want to hear? And when I say that, here's a good example. So does somebody want to hear bullet points because they've got the kind of, personality that they just want the quick and dirty details? Or is it someone who would really rather hear the social proof? Like, we took the same approach with clients that are in your very similar scenario. They're 5 years from retirement. This is what it ended up doing for them. So everybody's different. So that conversation style is important. And then the second thing is the behavioral finance portion. The big thing there is how do you get clients typically to stay the course when things are scary? Right now is a good time to be talking about that
Right.
because advisors have been so busy on the phone, in their emails, doing webinars, anything they can do to get in front of clients. So I'll take a quick break there because whatever follow up you have there. But that is an area that advisors rather don't think about. But I can give you some good examples of some things they should be looking for.
Yeah. I think what's interesting that you just shared there, Cindy, is, the points that you bring up are not unique to any one industry.
Right.
I was reflecting on thinking about, the years that I spent in the SaaS software cloud, whatever they want to
Mm-hmm.
call it now, right? Technology space.
Mm-hmm.
And lack of communication, it was a number one thing that people would get upset with us for. We'd show up, we'd have our contract in hand, it'd be time for the renewal. We'd probably be
Right.
coming like 90 days before the contract expired and be saying, "Hi there, uh, you know, how do you feel about renewing? And not only how do you feel about renewing, we want you to buy more stuff from us, right?"
Right.
And meanwhile, the
Right.
client is sitting there thinking like, wow, when's the last time we had a conversation
Yep.
that was of value for me as a client?
Mm-hmm.
And I can appreciate that. And then, the environment that everybody's in right now is certainly, I mean, if there was ever a chance that you might have for your customer to pick up the phone, it actually is likely now, because
Right.
everybody is very concerned and trying to figure out what are they going to do, what's their strategy in the financial world, right? It's almost like you want to open up your portfolio and like, shield your
Yeah,
eyes a
exactly.
little bit. Like, I don't really
Right.
want to see this because
Right.
it's reminding me of like 2009.
Right.
Right. So when you started to get into a little bit of the like communication styles. And so,
Mm-hmm.
so you've got two things going on. It's like, hey, we need to communicate more. B, we're in a moment where it's now more than ever, our clients want to hear from us.
Right.
Right. And then it's the question of how do we best communicate with them, which you started to get into. And the thing
Mm-hmm.
that I was wanting to understand is, for our listener, these are for our sales leaders who are listening to us and they're trying to think about how do they guide their own teams in whatever industry they're in, and even how do they guide themselves, because they're
Right.
oftentimes getting pulled into these escalation type conversations or serving as an executive sponsor for
Mm-hmm.
customers. What are some of the things you find are like are there any like cheat codes or
Yes.
yeah, talk
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that. Like how do you figure out how to talk to somebody? Like you're heading into a call, you don't really know who's going to be on the other end. Maybe your team prepped you, maybe they didn't, or maybe they prepped you but they don't really know.
Right, right, right. So interestingly, there's a couple of questions that you can ask yourself, and then you can kind of plot people and figure out where might they fit. The first one is, are they talkative or are they not as talkative? That's really question number one. And question number two is, are they really approachable or are they not quite as approachable? Are they a little bit, kind of keeping things close to their vest?
Hmm.
And then once you figure that out, if somebody is very talkative, it can be one of two things. They're either approachable or they're not approachable,
Right.
right? Or they're
Right.
not quite as warm. So if they're talkative, but they're very, very direct and they're not quite as approachable, you want to get to the bullet points, right? If you are talking to them about, well, the markets did this, and when they came on to talk about the economy, they did this, that's going to drive that person crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Want the bullet points.
Hmm.
But if somebody's talkative and approachable, they may want to hear some of that type of thing. They want to hear, well, tell me a little bit more. Why is this happening? That is something that, they like to be able to hear. If they're not as talkative, so there's kind of four quadrants. If they're not as talkative and they're not as maybe quite as warm and approachable, a lot of times it's because they are very, very analytical. And I believe me, I know a lot of warm analytical people, so I don't want it to sound that way, but they're not openly, sharing their life story with you, right? They're a little bit more reserved. So making sure that they see data and stats on why you shouldn't get out of the market now, if that's the point you're trying to make with that person. And then the last you have is what I call the steady supporter. That's the person who's a little more introverted, but kind of more of that people pleaser. They really need that hand holding to be able to go kind of step by step and walk them through and make sure that they know, like to your point, back in 2008, the market recovered. But everything's going to be okay. And again, we're looking obviously as long as their goals and everything are the same. There's those two questions, and I know that's a lot in a short period of time, but it does give you a good feel for what's going to appeal to this person. It's not what appeals to you, right? As the having the conversation, it's what is going to resonate with them. And there's actually a lot of science behind it. And kind of once you get it under your belt, it's pretty cool stuff. And it really, really does work.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. So that's on more on behavioral side. I'm curious. So you shared with me that you got early. I want to go back to early in your career if we can for a minute.
Sure.
Um, and we may circle back to this other topic.
Okay.
What I want to cover is you'd shared your one of your first sales jobs with me, and you and I
Yes.
had a very similar experience, I think, in our
Yeah.
first sales jobs. I think it'd be fun to talk a little bit about that. So let's do that.
Yeah, of course. So that was the job that I mentioned. I was there for a year and 9 months and 2 weeks, or whatever the time frame was that I gave. But it was your true boiler room scenario. You watch Glengarry Glen Ross, any salesperson who's been in the business forever has seen that movie, and it was like the person would come out in the boiler room, and some people would get the good leads, you know. So and I shared a phone. It was a totally open area, and I shared a phone with three other gentlemen, and I was the only female. So there was probably about 26 people. I was fresh out of college. I didn't know what I was doing. I really didn't. I joke that I learned a lot about what to do. And I also learned a lot about what not to do.
Yeah.
So it was a good training ground, but man, everybody pays their dues, and that was definitely paying my dues. That's for sure.
Oh my goodness. Well, and then you went on to lead sales teams
I did.
also. Yeah.
Yeah. So and it's interesting that this is something that's, close to my heart as well, because a lot of times when you become a manager, as you know, they take, the people that are good salespeople and then they make them a manager. And if that's two totally different jobs and skill sets. So the first time I became a manager was many moons ago. It was in literally like the mid 90s. And I really didn't know what I was doing other than to coach other advisors what I did, that made me successful. Um, but that's not I mean, that makes some sense, right? Because it obviously worked, but everybody's different. So one of the things that I learned as I continued in that role, which I was in that role for many, many years, is, how do you really coach as a sales leader and as a woman sales leader? I actually had advisors, both men and women, say, "You're my first female manager." I had no idea what that was going to be like. And it's really not any different, right? I mean, we're all after the same thing as far as we just want to help. So I did learn things like you want to have one-on-ones. You want to, when you're having sales meetings, they don't really care about hearing anything from me. They want to hear from their peers. They want to hear what's working,
Yes.
right? So I just tried to facilitate all of them talking. Me standing, first of all, I don't sit at the head of the table. That's something my dad taught me. I just don't do that. I always sit in the middle. But I just facilitated them, sharing ideas and talking and learning and team building just naturally, just by chatting. So it's something that I really, really do enjoy, helping advisors better themselves, however that looks for them.
Yeah. So you mentioned being the only woman a couple of times now. You were the only woman on that first job and the boiler room job. And
Yep.
then you said the people that you had reporting to you came to you and said, you're the first female manager
Right.
that I've ever had.
Yep.
So I'm imagining I know the answer here, but I don't want to make
That's all right.
assumptions
Let's
that
hear it.
in the financial services world, financial advisory, wealth management, how diverse in terms of, females in higher level
Yeah.
positions, like what's it
It's
like?
it's just not the way it should be by any stretch. I believe the number is 23%. I think 23% of the financial advisors are women. And women are going to typically, just because of the life cycle, women typically living longer than men, they're going to inherit, trillions of dollars over the next decade. And one of the things that's an interesting stat as well is that a lot of times, if it's a husband and wife and the husband dies first, the wife leaves the advisor because the advisor didn't build the relationship like they thought they did with the
Oh,
couple. Yeah. So there's a lot of that, right? There's a lot of how do you appeal to your female clients the same way you appeal to your male clients. And so yeah, there's not enough diversity in the industry. Women are starting to make their own financial decisions more than they used to. That's just going to become more and more. And one of the things that there's some organizations out there trying to do is trying to get girls in high school and young women in college more interested in the M and STEM. Because in the US in particular, right around that late middle school, high school age, girls just a lot of times say, I hate math.
mm,
So there's a lot of us out there trying to change that by volunteering, at those ages, but we have a really, really long way to go. And it's such a huge opportunity.
yeah. Oh my gosh, I can appreciate that. There was a minute in my career, and it was, oh gosh, it was almost 20 years ago, Cindy, where I'd gotten my MBA, and I, of course, was just like, oh, I don't know what I want to do. I mean, I had
Right.
all these ideas about what I wanted to do. And one of them was I wanted to go in either private equity or wealth management. So I went and met with one of my really good college friends that happened to also move from Wyoming, where I'm from, and live in Atlanta. And he became one of the top producers at Goldman Sachs. And he got me an interview there. I interviewed. And he pulled me aside, and this really influenced me. And this is different, maybe. He pulled me aside and he said, "Hey," he said, "Look, you can do this because I have no doubt that you can do it. I'm just going to share with you right now. This is really tough. This is really, really tough." And maybe that was specific or unique to the atmosphere at Goldman in their wealth management practice.
Mm-hmm.
Something that just kind of stood out to me in my brain of like, ooh, I don't know that I want to do that. Do you think that overall wealth advisory is still extremely and financial advisory is cutthroat? Is that how you would describe it?
I don't think it is like it used to be anymore. No, I
Yeah.
think that that's gotten a lot better. I think the industry is looking to, at more holistic planning. It used to be the world's definitely changed. I mean, there are so many rules and regs now that there used to not be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be some folks, right? But the majority of the people that I see are out there trying to
Yeah.
help each other be better and better help clients.
Yeah. Well, you talked about some of these women that are now, perhaps maybe they weren't guiding the portfolio or guiding these wealth choices and who they were going to hire to be their advisor. A lot of the listeners that I have on this call, some of them are the ones that are choosing the advisors that they have for themselves and their families. And some of them are at a point in their lives where they really haven't done that yet because they might
Right,
just still be, and it's totally cool and okay if you are, but you might just be investing your 401k and
right.
maxing that out and really focusing on getting that done.
Yeah.
If you were to pull aside a woman who was really wanting to find an advisor that she felt like she could trust and work with, what are some of the things that you would recommend that we look for, or questions that we would ask to help guide us there?
That's a really, really good question, Amy. I think the number one question is, how do they work with their clients? What does that look like? Because you want to work with an advisor that takes a financial planning approach. There are some folks out there that are money managers that will manage money, but that's not the same thing as taking a financial planning approach. When you take a financial planning approach, the person is going to be asking you all the deep stuff, right? They should be, if they're too, I'll use the word surfacey, my made up word.
Yeah.
If they're too surfacey, that's not a good thing, because that means they're not getting really kind of deep into what your goals are. So for example, we have two kids, 21 and 26. Our 26-year-old, it has a chronic illness and she's a special needs child. So, those are things that if I'm talking to any advisor, I need to be comfortable having that conversation, because that impacts the financial decisions we make. If someone is looking at saying, I want to retire by age 60 or 63 or 58 or 67, whatever it is, you want someone to be able to be alongside you and work with you, on that path. So one of the things I like to say is, we want to use plan as a verb, not as a noun. You don't want someone who's going to give you a plan and then that's it. You want them to plan along with you on your journey, so that if things change, spouse passes away, someone gets laid off, and they've got this big 401k, because that's what happens a lot. One of the big questions I would ask is, how do you work with your clients? If they've got a financial planning approach, that's the number one thing. And then quite honestly, after that, it's a matter of, have the secondary question. Can you give me some examples of how you've worked with clients like myself? Someone who's been laid off, or someone who lost a spouse, or someone who's thinking about retirement in 5 years. And then after that, it's really, does it feel like a good fit? I mean, everything else beyond that is ancillary. If they take a planning approach and they've worked with clients that are in that same situation, everything else from there is, do you feel good about that relationship?
Yeah. So if you were going to are there some places that you would recommend folks go look? Like, I don't know that you're probably in a position to give an endorsement on a particular
Right.
firm, but if someone listening is thinking, okay, I've been meaning to do this,
Right.
and where do I get started? Because I really
Yeah.
do believe the where do I get started question is what trips everybody up. They may not know where to go. Maybe their parents didn't have an advisor, right? They don't
Yes.
have any
Right.
context or frame of reference for it other than, I think I need this and I'm not really
Right.
sure. And what's worse is that I don't even know where to start.
I think that's a great question, Amy. I think one of the first places I would start, there is a website called letsmakeaplan.org.
Mm,
And that actually shows the folks. I think you just put your zip code in, and it shows people who are certified financial planners who have that CFP designation. There are a lot of people out there, advisors out there, who do planning that don't have the CFP designation. But if someone does have that designation, that's just one thing you don't have to worry about in terms of, well, what type of approach does this financial advisor take? Are they a money manager or are they a planner? If you find that someone has that CFP designation, they have to go through rigorous study to be able to get that certification. And that really is kind of the wave of the future. There's a lot more people who are getting that designation now than there used to be, because it does show that they went through that rigorous study. They should be taking that planning approach. That's a really good place to start.
yeah, that's awesome. That's so awesome. I've got a technical question.
Sure.
Uh, so, for the longest time, and this was like a point of confusion for me before I did get a planner for myself and my family.
Mm-hmm.
For the longest time, I didn't understand the difference between a certified financial planner and a wealth manager and all those
Uh,
things. So there, maybe there's a question there, but what I'm also thinking about is just, where, the tightness of the alignment of the fiduciary responsibility.
yes.
Is there a distinction there between like what your certification is and if you're shopping for a planner, how do you
That's a
know?
good question. So it's kind of interesting. You hit, an interesting point there. So there's two different standards. There's the fiduciary standard,
Mhm.
which all CFPs automatically have to go by the
You should probably
fiduciary standard.
explain what a fiduciary
Yeah,
standard
yeah. So the
is.
fiduciary means that you're doing what's in the best. You are doing the best thing for the client. Really, you're on the same side of the table as the client.
Okay.
So that means that, you actually you have to make recommendations that any reasonable person would make in that same scenario.
Mhm.
That's a tight standard. It's very tight. And so, for example, CFPs have to follow the fiduciary standard. Anytime you do
And
advisory
I'm just going to
business,
pause to translate CFP as a certified financial
financial
planner.
planner,
Okay,
correct,
got it.
right. That's sorry, my apologies. That's the one we were talking about a little bit ago. So
Yep.
the certified financial planner automatically follows that. Anything that's considered advisory business, money management business, and I won't get too detailed, but that follows the fiduciary standard. But I will say that the other side of that coin, though, on the security side, which is another side, they have to follow the best interest standard. That is really, really close to the fiduciary standard. The best interest standard says you have to do what's in the best interest of the client. Advisors still have to, like, say, I talked to the client about these 6 or 7 things, and this is the route we decided to go, with the client's input, obviously. So there was a lot going on with the best interest standard. It was going to maybe be the fiduciary standard, but they stopped just one point shy of going all the way to the fiduciary standard. But quite frankly, if you are working with an advisor that, again, I think is taking a planning approach, whether they have the CFP designation or not, they could still be taking a planning approach. That's what you really want. You want someone looking at your goals and your long-term goals.
Yeah. That's that. Thank you for sharing that. The last one I would ask on this kind of topic is, let's say I've got an advisor. How often should I be meeting with them?
That's a good question. All your questions are good. I keep saying that, John Amy. So it really depends. I mean, what I will say is you want to hear from your advisor. That meeting with them and hearing from them is sometimes two different things, right? You want an advisor that's proactive, picking up the phone here and there if something's going on. Let's put it this way. If you haven't heard from your advisor in the last 2 months, candidly, I would be picking up the phone and looking around, because the markets have been insane. And that is where we talk about that proactive communication, because you want to be able to hear from your advisor when times are tough. We learned that back in 2008. A lot of advisors lost business because they plain did not communicate. And some advisors say, well, I prepared my clients for this. I think they'll be fine. Nope. You still have to pick up the phone. Doesn't matter how many times you've had that conversation, have a webinar, pick up the phone, send something out, make sure they're okay. So how often you meet with them really depends. Some need to meet more often. You should meet at least annually. But some will want to meet more often than that. Some will meet quarterly. It depends. But anytime you feel like you have something that might be changing, just pick up the phone and call your advisor and make that appointment.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's awesome. Thank you. So, Cindy, what if somebody wants to learn more about your work,
Mm-hmm.
the coaching, the advisement that you do
Mm-hmm.
for financial services advisory firms? How would they find you?
Yeah, I think the easiest way probably, Amy, is I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. And if you go to my LinkedIn profile and it's Cindy Nagel, Nagel, that'll say CFP after that. I have a 15-minute calendar link. Someone can just pop on, or they can send me a DM. Just pop some time. And again, whether it's practice management, behavioral finance, communication strategies, working with teams. I've even worked with everything from building teams to succession planning. Any questions at all? Because if I don't do it, and I don't have expertise in it, I will tell you, but then I will also probably know someone who does.
Yeah.
So feel free to just pop some time on and we'll have a chat.
Awesome. That's excellent. Cindy, thank you so much for joining today. I'm so
Thank you,
grateful.
Amy.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you having me. It was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Women in Sales Leadership podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us and share this with a friend. I'm serious. Stop right now and take a look at the app, whatever app you're using to listen to this episode on, and hit follow and share this with a friend. Send them a text. See if they would enjoy this show as well, learning all about and meeting women in sales leadership. Hey, and if you know somebody who is crushing it in sales leadership and should be on this show, reach out to me on LinkedIn, Amy Evans, or the Women in Sales Leadership podcast. I would love to connect. See you next time.